Welcome everyone to Rockaz Book Club. We are on the Reggae online platform. I'm Karl O'Brian Williams, one of the people that's facilitating this process. I'm just going to point on Shawna-Kae, and she's going to introduce herself and just
Hi,
gonna
my name is
bring up
Shawna-Kae
our
Burns. I am one of the facilitators here for the book club. Excited to be here for this Meet the Author, and we're going to have a fabulous conversation.
Fabian, that's you.
We must am I
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
you sir.
My name is Fabian Thomas. I am also a facilitator of this book club. It is my first time on. I will not
Yay!
present the others. This is my virgin voyage.
Hey,
Sister,
hey.
Sister Maisie, I am
I
going
love
to
that.
clear front. I have not read the book yet.
Okay.
Look late. Sit here. I have it right here. Brand new and so.
Well, I love that you have the book. So biggest surprise.
Ordered from Bookophilia. Brand new and so.
Hey.
Don't read it yet. But I'm happy to own it.
Yes.
Thank you for buying it.
Yes.
I love it. So we have with us the author of our featured book right now. Featured book is These Ghosts Are Family by Maisy Card. Maisy, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday. Let's have a conversation for us to just get into your brain, and we're just going back and forth about what this book
Mm.
is about. And so some of the people in our book club have finished it, some have not. But with book clubs, you don't have to. We're still going to talk about it because it excites us to get into it and finish the book. So yes. So I just want to throw out the first question. And my first question is, what question do you wish you've been asked about this book that you have never been asked about this book before?
Nice, Carl.
I feel like I've been asked a lot of questions about this book. It's hard to think of one.
And we can throw back to that question.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I guess I don't get asked a lot about like influences as much, but I have been asked. Yeah. That's something I like to think about.
Well, let's start there. Who or what are your influences? And because when you have a title like These Ghosts Are Family, for us, we think Duppy first.
Yeah.
It's just like, why is this about writing about Duppy? But we love it, we love it as much as we read and all of that. We it comes up in conversation at least once a month for
Yeah.
us. Yes.
Yeah. I think I spent a long time writing it, so it's like about 12 years. I think till from the time I started writing it till the time it was sold. So I think there are a lot of different influences. I think the ones that I usually talk about when I do these kind of clubs are kind of the family influences, which might be the most kind of obvious part of it. But also, just like there are a lot of writers specifically that I think I was reading while I was writing this. I think Michelle Cliff, No Telephone to Heaven was a big influence. Jamaica Kincaid is always an influence. A lot of American writers. I was teaching an survey of African American literature survey, like for many years when I was writing this book. And I think, I would read, books in the, Black literary canon in America and kind of wonder what the Jamaican equivalent was. It's like, how do we wrestle with these same issues? So I think Incidents of the Life of a Slave Girl, Passing by Nella Larson, Quicksand by Nella Larson, a lot of Toni Morrison, Beloved, A Mercy. There are just so many books that I kind of reread while I was writing this.
Beloved changed my life, by the way.
What?
Beloved changed my life.
Yeah.
Tony tends to do that, right?
Yeah. So basically what jumped it was 12 years. So in terms of the other things that you've written, is that like a standard time? Is that or is this one of the longer periods on working on a manuscript?
I hope it's the longest that I ever spend. Because I'm trying to write another book and I don't want to ever spend this long. I mean, I think when you write a book for that long, it's like you change as a person. Like I was in my 20s, early 20s when I started writing the book, and then I was in my late 30s when I finished writing the book, or some sort of timeline. I mean, yes, I mean, and it might be even more than 12 years when I really kind of think about it, because the idea started in college and kept evolving.
So,
Right, but
Maisy,
we should remind everybody, for our viewers, that this is also Macy's first book, right?
mm,
This
Right.
is the first one.
Yeah.
So and when you think about the writers, when you get that first book, and then there's the Mark. People always refer to Mark Twain with, with how long. So yeah, Shauna, go ahead with your
all
question.
right. So I was asking, so how was it for you, Maisy, in terms of, or how did you hold on to the feeling of wanting to continue this book? Um, because certainly if I think about my 20s to my late 30s, so much of me has changed. Like I think about ideas or something that I might have been interested in, and by the end of my 30s, I'm just like, absolutely not. How do you think you are able to say, or was it just like pure grit? I've started this project, I'm going to finish it. How did you maintain this kind of interest to keep this project, to keep this book alive?
I think you change as a person when you're writing for something that long, and I think you need to be okay with making a drastic change and just starting over. So I did start over a lot. And also I think the book sort of changed based on things that were happening in my life, and I think everybody has their obsessions, and I think my obsession is kind of like family and kind of understanding family, and understanding and just like history. Before, I'm a librarian now, but I trained to be an archivist, so I just interested in history and ephemera, and kind of getting to the bottom of kind of what makes people the way they are. So I think when I started writing the book, I was trying to use it as a way to understand different people in my life. And then I think the people that I was trying to understand kept changing as I wrote it. And I think, that was what made it interesting to me. Like initially, I think um, what influenced the book was a series of essays that I'd written in college about my father. And then over time, I kind of started thinking about my grandfather, especially as he was aging and he got dementia, and kind of thinking about like all the kind of how how little we really know about him and his past, and how little in general we really know about his Jamaican history. I feel like it's something that was never there. I think my family kind of, and a lot of families, we rely on this lore, this kind of family lore, and that's what we talk about, and that's what gets passed down. But you don't know how much rooted in reality it is. And I think for me, thinking about the difference between family stories and the actual story was just always something that I was kind of obsessed with. And obviously it's so difficult to really get to the truth of the past, but it was interesting to me to kind of make make it up. And I could keep evolving. The story could keep evolving over time as I got bored, which is probably why it's so like I think a nice way to put it was like kaleidoscopic. And I saw another I think somebody on Goodreads said it was like a glorious mess. But I think it's because as the more you learn about family, the more you kind of untangle that history, or try to make a family tree, the more like crazy it gets, confusing. There are just so many puzzle pieces to put together, and I think I just wanted to reflect that in the book, and I felt like it just something that was so ambitious that it never really got boring, as long as I let myself like go in the direction that my interests were taking me, or that research was taking me.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Definitely.
You mentioned the family tree. Fabian, you had something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious. When or how did you know it was finished?
I think that's the good thing about getting an agent and an editor, is that they tell,
You told her
they
your
can,
hand.
yeah. Because I think by myself, I probably would have felt like I needed to keep going and keep going. And I think I wasn't ready to let go. But once I had somebody who I had a contract with, I was able to, we were both able to agree that, this is the ending, or this is what I'm writing toward, because I started it when I was younger. And so I just didn't know if anybody was like waiting for it or if anything was going to happen with it. So I was kind of more after a point just writing it for myself. But yeah, when I started writing it with other people, that's when it was easier to kind of let it go. But I think, you just kind of have to, you just get to a point where you say, this is the best that I can do, and you just have to leave it at that. Like nothing's ever going to be perfect.
How was that switch from writing it for yourself to then the collaborative experience? You don't necessarily have to go into the challenges, but you could just tell us how that was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging because I think sometimes there are things in a book that but it's challenging, but it was rewarding at the same time, because there were parts of this book that I had been writing certain chapters for like from the very beginning. The second chapter, which is called The Lamb or the Lion, I technically started that chapter when I was like a college student. And it just, even to the point where I sold it, it just didn't feel right. But it was just the best that I can do. But when I started editing it, with a professional editor, that's when I kind of had more ideas, and she was able to throw out suggestions. And yeah, it's like sometimes when you feel like you have nothing left, I think sometimes working with an editor gives you that last push to kind of see what you're capable of. So it's a pretty good, it was a great experience, actually. It's overwhelming because I've never, you're not used to getting edits at on such a large scale. But yeah, ultimately I'm glad I did it.
And speaking of scale, I hope nobody minds. I just want to go into structure, also because the family tree was mentioned. That's a part of the text. It's pretty strong. In the book club, we tell people to pay attention to that family tree and to pay attention as we're going through periods. So people need to kind of go back and figure out the names, and which is pretty exciting for me because I love that stuff. You've got memories, you've got letters, you've got news reports, you've got dialogue, you've got these subheadings. Just speak to us about, or just kind of walk us through a little bit as to how that all came about as you're putting it together.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the family tree, that was one thing that came out of having an editor and an agent. Like, I didn't have a family tree in the beginning. I didn't think I was going to have one, just because yeah, I think sometimes with the trees, like I wanted it to be it gives this impression of this perfect, kind of perfectly organized family history. And I feel like the whole point of the book was the opposite. But yeah, no, once they suggested it to me, and I'm hearing like readers say that they need the tree, I'm glad I got that push to include it. But yeah, I think with the different ways of telling the story, I think I just wanted it to be kind of like, I wanted it to be like my experience learning about my family, and that's kind of, it's not like, it was never, my parents telling me a clear, straightforward story about like, where we come from in our past. It was always like, it was a ghost story, or it was like,
a piece here, a piece there.
Yeah, and you find like little clues. And, while I was doing this too, I took a DNA test. And I started getting into genealogy. So it's like seeing other people's family trees and talking to other people and like kind of weighing that against what I've been told to kind of get to the truth.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted the reader to have a similar experience, like putting the puzzle pieces together, reading letters, reading newspaper articles, reading, hearing different testimonies from different family members and kind of getting at their own conclusion about who these people were, felt more authentic to my experience of learning about family history.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it, especially as the person who voiced the author.
Yeah. You should.
As an actor, that is that was a joy and a wonderful challenge to take on. But yeah. Before I say anything else, who are we throwing to next? Questions? Or
I think, okay, so one that just kind of popped up as I was reading early on in the book. was it very important to you? You just spoke about like the newspaper articles and the letters and so on, to actually ground it in correct history of Jamaica. Like, for example, when Selassie came to visit Kingston, and was that something that was actually significant in reality with you finding out some information about the family, or was just this something that was just color and texture for you in terms of oh, this would be nice, this whole thing is unfolding with the backdrop of Selassie's visit to Kingston, for example.
No, it was important for a couple of reasons. I think first, just obviously growing up here in the United States, you don't learn about Caribbean history, even though there's a lot of overlap between Black American history and Caribbean history, but you don't really learn much of anything, until I got to college and I was able to kind of specialize. But I think it was important to me to kind of think about the kind of way Jamaica is represented in mainstream kind of Western culture, and then to think about like the reality of it, and then also to think about how my family represented Jamaica to me, and to think about the reality of that too. I think both the different sides of my family, my maternal and paternal side, kind of see Jamaica in a very different way. And I think I'm trying to say this in a nice way. I think one side one side tends to not want to I think growing up didn't want to identify with the African past as much as the colonial past. And I think that's why the Haile Selassie visitation was kind of important to me, just symbolically to include. There's the character Irene, not Irene, the mother, Vera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who's kind of like a light-skinned upper class woman who's been taught to kind of disavow everything that's Black, and I feel like my grandfather kind of shared those kind of illusions too. So I wanted to have a character like that in this moment where literally like an African king was coming, and everybody in the island is moving in a totally different ideological direction. And then I think also with slavery, I even recently I've like talked to my mother, because I was able to trace one side of our family back to my sixth grade grandmother. Who was enslaved, and that's the side of the family who thinks they're kind of white, and so it was a big, like, kind of disruptive piece of history to hear that they came from slaves, even though it should be obvious, but it was like something that was denied and disavowed for a really long time. So I really wanted to have, a chapter at least that wrestled with slavery and wrestled with the impact of that, and the reality that sometimes, at least some of the people I grew up around would kind of venerate the colonial ancestors instead, and just I think, I can't remember the writer who said that. I think it was Zadie Smith. Like every Caribbean person has like a photo of that one white grandfather or something, and I felt like I just identified with that so much, because I felt like I didn't grow up with the other side of my family, so I grew up with the side that was just really like to kind of be nostalgic for this idea that, we come from Scotland, and that's what I was told, you know what I mean? And it just didn't make any sense.
Once you have a last name, you look for the family crest. Where's the family crest?
Yeah.
That is it.
It belongs to Scotland, Ireland,
or Ireland, yes.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the UK.
And it's like it is true in a sense, because I was able to trace those ancestors too, but we have to, nobody ever wanted to speak like plainly about, what really, about slavery and the relationships between Black and white people. And I felt like too, when I was reading novels, even some Caribbean novels, it's for some reason there's always a love story, like an interracial love story where the slave is in love with the master, and and I just really wanted to write something that was anti that, and make sure that I represented slavery in a way where it was not a love story,
You know, when you mentioned Jamaica Kincaid as one of your influences, I immediately went to Lucy, that that character because of how she speaks, and when she finds out, you know, her name and where it comes from, and the
Yeah.
pasta, and the embracing of that. But yeah, you have characters in here that I think represent very well that sort of dual personality, philosophy, psychosis, if you will, when it comes to race, when it comes to, because it's very complex in Jamaica. You know, this idea, our very motto is one. When you think about the national symbols, how they came about, some people have it to say it was to make the brown people at the top of the ladder feel good about themselves in order to include everybody, even though and people don't like to talk about that now, or they do. But it's there through the characterizations, it's there through the stories. I love the fact that, you know, when we talk about the police, we were talking about that the other day in the book club. You know, this kind of respect for authority, or disrespect for authority, and where that comes from. This character that did not want to be in the police force, because that is also messing with with notions of his own masculinity.
Okay, yeah.
So
And it's funny, some of those same themes are still so relevant even when you talk to the young people today. You know, same issues around authority, especially with the police force and who they actually view the police as opposed to like the defense force. Very, very different sentiments. You know, same things about the family lineage, and you know, everybody have to say, oh yeah, man, because still as a people, no matter how far we've reached with the Afrocentrism and the blackness and all of those things, and I find that even when you look at TikTok generation, and there's a lot of shout out that goes, oh, this white person that is speaking Jamaican, you're not really Jamaican. And there's a lot of ways in which, when Jamaicans are still ready, we like to throw our motto out there. Out of many, one people, please.
Mhm.
But then it's also it's used as a weapon. It's used as a shield. It's used as so many things, and or ideas of and or ideas of how we represent ourselves to a wider audience.
Yeah, and I think you know, part of what I found interesting was just growing up in America. You know, when I would, you know, when I was younger, I lived in a Caribbean neighborhood. I lived in Queens, so it's a lot of Caribbean people. But then when I started to go to high school in Manhattan, um, you know, and there are mostly white student population, people would say like, oh, you know, you're not black, you're Jamaican. And I was like, what does that mean? You know, and then I mean, it has to do with how people have intentionally represented Jamaica to outsiders. You know, and so that, yeah, out of one people, out of many, one is can be used to kind of you know, pass a little bit, you know, and differenti- uh, differentiate ourselves from like other black people. And I feel like when I was growing up, I would see it used that way. Um, and so I kind of wanted to write something where our blackness was clear, you know what I mean? But while at the same time acknowledging that, you know, I have the character towards the end who doesn't realize that she's black because she's so white passing. You know, and I think, you know, for me, at least in the context of my family, it was important to acknowledge that, you know, uh, there were a series of violent events that had to happen for this skin color to be achieved by the rest of my family. You know, and it's something that should not be like loathed but not celebrated either, you know, because
yeah,
it's the product of history, you know.
I saw a timeline recently about, you know, the one of these first time black woman or black person was allowed here, first time this woman was allowed here, and it made me think of, I think my mother told me a story about the first time you saw someone of a darker complexion behind, as the face of a bank, would have been in the 1970s, and there was a hotel, the Myrtle Bank Hotel, that in the 40s, I don't, none of us could have worked there. We could
There,
not be
yeah,
employed there. No one on this street. You had to have, you know, this sort of, when we get to the parts of these ghosts of family that's harkening back to the 18th and 19th century, with that kind, you hear they're talking about the octoroon, the quadroon, you know, we still somehow it's not so long ago that we have held on to these demarcations of color, and still today some
Yeah.
people will throw around the word mulatto very, very casually and to identify themselves.
Yeah, and I've spoken to people online since I've been doing genealogy, people who are distantly related to me, but from the same place that my grandfather was from. And I spoke to somebody whose like tagline was fifth generation mulatto from Saint Elizabeth, and that was the point of pride. And maybe it's also because he's of an older generation, but that's the kind of mindset that I grew up with, and so being the only dark child, made me question why I looked this way when everybody else that I grew up with besides my father, looked a different way. And why I didn't inherit these genes, but as I got older, I started to understand more.
And what's interesting, Maisy, in the contemporary space, but also not so contemporary. You're not dark.
Yeah,
Brown skin girl.
I was about to say, imagine you're the dark skinned girl.
Yeah.
I love my cat, I love my uncle, I love my money and thing. Most of all, I love my brownie.
Yes.
So even that context, right? Because for you, with people, I say to some young people this weekend, I said, when you go abroad, you're black.
Yeah,
you're not brown, but they don't know that. So in our space, in the regional space, in the Jamaica space, we have these demarcations of really dark skin, not so dark, brownie, and then as you go up, the value increases based on your brownness, and that's a colonial throwback in a big way. And we have a massive thing with bleaching in Jamaica now.
Yeah.
Because people say black not keep, and when they look at who gets by, who gets attention, and what prettiness means. So even in 2023, it's still a very real thing in families, and in families that are in Jamaica, not even living anywhere outside Jamaica. So that colonial specter of that color demarcation is still very present, and in the writers and poets space as well, because as you said, we see it, we hear it, the stories our parents told, or the stories you were not told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is suspicion about anything black and African. Fabian can tell, Shawna can tell you, all of us do this kind of work. Fabian's group is called Tribe Sankofa. And
What is a Sankofa?
His own stories about when he puts the logo up, or when he puts on something from Tribe Sankofa. If some people is what that again is something about blackness again. The first time I wrote for the stage, and when I caught the black that I am, and I did that in Jamaica, people were just like, the black that what about blackness again? This no matter
why do we still need to talk about this?
There is this. Some people have a reaction to when you decide purposefully to either rename yourself, name your group. Naming is very important. Name your group or your play, whatever it is, your piece of art or you're going to dedicate a project to this purpose, and you put black there in a country that is over 95%.
75% them say no. The number gone down.
Is it?
Yes, I guess we don't know.
75? How?
Jamaica, so we're no longer 95% of African descent.
It's such a powerful thing because, as you said, in the spaces, in interacting with people at the university space. When I was teaching at University of the West Indies,
that is it.
Whenever Haiti come up, voodoo, Kumina, anything that was black and African, the students who go, evil, they would go, literally, some of them would say, evil, wickedness, the reaction, and it's that thing of that anything that looks like us, the thing that's too African, people we have been taught is bad. That's the bad side of your ancestry. Mm-hmm. That's not the good part. And some of these students can't just black, but their reaction will always be they're like, and then so you have to do a kind of re-education around and help them trace where did that feeling come from. And like you said, Maisy, it come from things my granny say, stories I heard how black members of my ancestry were talked about in the family. And some of them have to unpack because when you ask them first, they don't realize, but it goes back to family. At that familial table, in that familial space, what were you told or what did you overhear? and how that informed how you felt about yourself and from what you're saying. And I love the fact that you're unpacking that with your family, because it's such an important thing to tell our familial stories and then unravel how they impact us.
Yeah. And I think for me too, because of how I immigrated here, I was kind of cut off from my paternal family, who, they all live in, or all from Frankfield in Clarendon. And so I grew up with kind of the city family. And so, so I didn't meet them till I was in maybe college, I think sophomore year of college. And so going to Frankfield, sophomore year of college, seeing everybody in the town dark-skinned, it completely changed my perception of Jamaica, because I had only been with my mother's family before, so I didn't know like that side of it. And I realized that, and I also like to be around in a community where, people can say like, this is where the plantation was, or these are our relatives who were enslaved, also changed, and who acknowledged it, also changed kind of how I thought about myself. And I think also to add to what you were saying, Fabian, I think I also wanted to include the chapter with Rastafarians, because I think, growing up here, it almost like Rastafarians come to represent Jamaica. The people in the West like love Rastafarians, and they paint this picture of Jamaica based on that, but they don't understand that they were actually like heavily persecuted. And I think that was important to kind of note too.
It was very
and still are persecuted, not as heavily, but it's still there.
Yeah. And I just saw that, even when I was younger and I used to go to my grandmother's house in Independence City, and I would, I remember once my mother had a friend from school who was a Rastafarian, and he was homeless, and she let him take a bath in our house, actually in the outside shower, and I could hear all my uncles and my aunts like talking about it, and how like kind of disgusting it was that she let him, kind of come in our house, and that kind of made me think differently. One of the first moments I remember like thinking differently, about what my family was kind of telling me.
Oh yes, my family told me many things. My grandmother, I love her dearly, dark-skinned woman, but when she said, I like this one, and she'll call a name, and after a while you realize, wait, there's a certain commonality with all the friends that you tend to
She
like.
likes. There's a trend.
Those are the ones that you're suspicious about. And I'm like, hold on here, and so it's a thing, and I love that something like that is in the book. The way that some of these characters discover their own prejudices and the prejudices within their family, because I think that for me that rings true, because I think, to use the current terminology, you learn to hold space for all of it, right? Because you realize, okay, me can't cancel my grandmother.
Yeah,
some people do. I'm sure Michael will come on this very thing and tell you he has canceled his.
Cancelled all of them.
but that's not something that that's not what I engage with in my family. Instead, it's like I just realized, wait, there's a problematic set of people here, and I come from this line of some serious classist, racist foolishness that's going on. And I think one of the things we were talking about in the book club a couple weeks ago was this idea of what's passed on in the book, the blood trauma and other traumas, So, you can comment on that. Anybody can comment on that, as we talk about the text and just how it's resonating, what's resonating post-text outside of the words and the real world that it comes from.
Well, for me, having not read the book, I think the title, I can tell you, maybe licked me in my chest because of a recent thing for me. So I'm glad I got knowledge. My parents, they were post-Windrush. They met in England, got married in England, had me there, experienced racism. They were very clear from me, a little picnic. We're not from here. They don't want us here. We come from a place named Jamaica, and we're going back there. That was the mantra. Actually, they told me Jamaican culture, and we came back. Took a ship that broke down in the sea, had to fly to Barbados, flew from Barbados, Oh, yes, I'm writing the book. Yes.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
But my,
But anyway,
But this is fabulous.
my father took his mother, so she lived with us, and she was an awful woman. Bitter. I mean, I heard my grandmother say some things, and the way she treated me. And so she was always this other, right? So she's dead. So I started to gather information to write this book about my family, and I'm glad I quickly, when you get excited, interview my parents on Skype doing that. And then my dad died during COVID. Didn't expect him to die. And he has a better recall than my mom. And my mom is having short-term memory loss now. But as I was getting all the information on my grandparents, I realized I had like 2 lines or 1 line on my grandmother, the terrible termagant. And I became fascinated. I'm like, who is this woman? Then also, what made her? Because there's a gap. So I have a cousin who's there, and I said, I have to talk to her. So now I'm more fascinated with her, who we kind of erased. You know her surname and that she come from Lucy. And I'm like, now I want to know who is this woman, what made her who she is, and how did the version of her I met. So that thing of sometimes, as Karl was mentioning, we say we erase certain portions of her, but all of it is us. And your title made me feel that these ghosts, either because them dead and gone, or ghosts because we erase them, they are family, whether we like it or not. And for me, that was really and continues to be very powerful.
Yeah, I was thinking about just how sorry, let me think about this. I was thinking about how as like the Jamaican, I don't want to like generalize Jamaican people, but Jamaican people I grew up around, I feel like we just made jokes about things that were dark, you know what I mean? I think people would laugh off, like my grandfather, he had like, when my mother was growing up, he had like secret families, I mean, he had families with a bunch of different women. And that was just something that I knew about. And it's like, I just accepted it because and my other grandfather did the same thing. And it was just something that I was kind of made to think is just like, oh, that's just what Jamaican men do. And that's just, normalize it and not stop and kind of process how that made my mother feel and how that made my aunts and uncles feel. And I feel like when my grandfather was older and had dementia, I feel like that's when you could see kind of some of the feelings start coming out. I think when there's that realization that you can't ever really talk to him again about these things because he's not there anymore. And I think that's when, for some people, that's kind of when the bitterness kind of sank in, and when it kind of hit me that, oh, all these actions have consequences, and there's also like trauma and pain behind these things, even though we used to make a joke about it, And I think about how some of the ghost stories that I would hear, when I really processed them when I was older, I was like, okay, I kind of understood what was happening. Like there were stories about my grandmother falling, and how the lady next door pushed her, who had died, like pushed her because she didn't like her. But what I realized now is that no, it's like my grandmother had, because we've been tested and we understand, it's like, no, she had a rare disease that was affecting her balance. And it was like, they were seeing it in all these different places, but they made this kind of, supernatural story to kind of explain it and to process it.
And that laughter ties perfectly into Maisy, the Jamaican saying, taking teeth, keep a heartburn. It hurts, it's painful, but you laugh about it.
Yeah.
And then you create a story around it that becomes the thing because it numbs the pain. It's a big part of our culture and who we are and how we express.
Oh
yeah.
Yes,
and it also
Fabian directs
makes
work is dramatic and has heard the audience laugh. At the moment, wait a second, that is not.
That's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, also, I think we the Jamaican audience, anybody really, but Jamaicans in particular, it's to make this thing bigger than it is. It puts it into folklore status and legend status and ethereal and, one time Granny used to say type of thing. And it makes it. And I think sometimes that's how we kind of reconcile not processing, because you don't need to process otherworldly. much like how you never question God, and we're hush hush around those things, and some things just go, which is why sometimes, especially when you begin in the family and you're younger, you just they don't tell you, even when you're probably grown enough to understand, because really and truly, mind your business. Or
Yeah.
old people business, that old people think that big, or rather big people business. And
But
so and which is why sometimes it's rough, because us trying to work through that now, when we're finally a part of the big people, many of the people who could answer these questions are now our familial ghosts.
Yeah.
And we're like, so Omega asks. And sometimes we have banned so many of those things that you might catch a one piece of something from an aunt here, from a cousin here, and you are piecing, and you say, no, wait, me never know that. Wasn't this that? And them say, no, shh. I saw them they tell the people, and you're like, but that is where we're going to continue in this kind of folklore mode. And as I said, maybe it's a part of the legendizing of our families for us, because we don't want to process, really. We don't want to go into that space where we have to face the truth of some of our family history.
One of my great aunts used to say, everything you don't want to know, no ask too much question. And I
and
said,
then what you hear,
a bad thing. She said, everything you don't want to know, you no ask too much question.
hug asking mama what make her mouth so what?
Yes, it's a long, yes.
And what was the answer?
When you grow up, you will see.
When
Is
you
it?
grow up, you will see,
You see.
because that's exactly what happens when the family become goes. Oh, this is exactly what these people are saying. It's
Yeah.
exactly what it just always happens. I don't know how. I don't know how that a set of people living for so long
Mhm.
that don't get the information that they need from some of their past ancestors, then grow to just kind of know and then pass on the same thing. But I see it happen. I see it happen with me. My father died when I was 25, and there are just certain things now that I'm almost, big 50. I'm almost there, that I'm just starting to realize. I'm like, wait, oh, that's what they were saying. Oh, I get that now. I
Mhm.
get that's why that saying was there. But before, I'm like struggling to know, and then you ask, and because again, we're not supposed to ask certain questions.
Mm-mm.
Ask. And
Maisy, I have a question for you. Who, other than yourself, who did you write this book for?
Um, I think I was thinking a lot about I guess people like me who people who immigrated here when they were young, or people who grew up with Jamaican families, Caribbean families, but also I think immigrant families in a sense too, where yeah, where you have this kind of like silence, where you don't talk about things, where you kind of have parents who um I don't want to say have like misplaced anger, but it's like the way they talk to you is not the way your friends' parents talk to you. And I think for me, this was a way for me to writing this book was a way for me to kind of understand, try to work out, who my parents are, who my grandparents were. So I think, I think I was thinking about kind of those people who had similar experiences, who feel like they know Jamaica and then feel like they don't know Jamaica at all.
And how is it when you visit now? Was the last time you were here? How is it when you come? You know,
It's
how are
very
you feeling in the space?
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, my experience since I've been older has been very good, because I go and I'm with my father's family, and I think just because, yeah, I don't know. There's something about being in like a rural town where your family has lived there for generations, where everybody knows who you are and comes from that town. It feels like you go there and everybody welcomes you and you kind of belong. I feel like there's already been a space for me. They made a space for me before I went there. So it's a very kind of different experience. But I think when I wrote the book, I was kind of thinking about, and I hope nobody in my mother's family is watching this, but I was thinking about that family, because specifically too because we immigrated, and I think everybody on that side of the family immigrated, and I think I wanted to kind of explore how that also, all the things that fracture families over time, and I think immigration is a big part of it, because there are certain things or certain ways of living, I think, when we were living in Jamaica, where everything held together. Nobody spoke about certain things. Nobody
Yeah.
kind of showed their resentment over certain things, but something about going to another country and having that space from your family, and from the place you're raised, it's like it just creates this distance, and people kind of,
Yeah.
and kind of like some of the old grudges kind of come out, um, you know, after immigrating.
I think as you were saying that, I mean, for me, I think certainly one of the bigger themes in the book is this idea of belonging. And, I think at certain points, all the characters were searching for belonging somewhere, whether it's in this physical geographical space or of family or of a profession of peace of mind. And I mean, when you had said, going back to a rural town and having a space there, and this idea that your space was never blank by virtue of being a part of this family, and this family that belonged to this town. Your space was never blank. It was always there, so you will always be. Similar way in the fashion that, once a Jamaican, always a Jamaican. You're always a son or a daughter of the soil, type of thing. And just this idea of the searching, to belong to something, to belong with someone. And definitely how immigrants feel when they go, or even when, not necessarily immigrants, but legal aliens, when you go to one of these countries, whether it's for college or move there, and belonging in that space, but also somehow never belonging in that space.
Mm.
Whether it might be the mainland, which is the fabulous way of now saying yard, um, or in this country that you have adopted, um, or that whole thing. And it's like, yes, I'm now Canadian, yes, I'm now American, yes, I'm now British, but I'm always Jamaican. But do I really feel as Jamaican as I should feel? And it's
Mm.
just the whole idea, as you're saying, about the distance and the gap. And I think sometimes reconciling these stories about our family helps to fill that gap, and helps to kind of ground you. And so I think sometimes until that processing happens, we don't yet feel grounded. Um, Carl and Fabian, Maisy, you guys can, jump in just saying about how, because everybody on this chat has immigrated or been there and been back and
This
travels
is true.
in the continuum of that space.
And
Um,
I want to heart, and I love the fact that you did include the family tree, Maisie, because one of the things that impacted me and hit me a lot when I lived in New York, and when I went to spaces with friends where they had family outside of New York, like the South, or there was how much like Jamaicans they were
Yeah.
in the rituals and the food, the cooking of the food. Or the one thing that struck me is so you are kin to who they place you, who you will, and so you belong. So even if you don't recognize, they ask you. So your card is card from so and so and so. So they're locating you in a familial space, and sometimes even if you don't put yourself there, they want to know. So and is that from so and so and so? And it was this amazing thing of, and once they and so now that they placed you, you were kin. You were
Yeah.
family. You were sit down, take off your shoes, because you belong here. And that beautiful thing of just your lineage and saying, so you are kin to who? And in Jamaica, say, so your family, who is your mother?
Mm.
From both town, are they one them from so and so and so and so? Older people used to do that. So they locate you geographically, but also spiritually. And then they say, come. So you are family. And that's a powerful thing. That thing of, and as Shawna said, where's your family, your tribe? Is it, you find a tribe in New York, you find a tribe in England, but your Jamaicanness is still a major part of your identity. And that thing, as Shauna said, some people am I Jamaican enough?
Yeah.
Because of certain things, and that how much is enough, and how do you locate and identify yourself in the world? A lot more people you see it online are doing these family searches. They're doing these archival searches to find out their family. Who am I? How did they get here? Because people want to know. So the ghosts of their family that either are telling the stories or told the stories. People are filling, a lot more Black people are trying to fill out the dots of their identity to kind of go, oh, so when I stand up flat-footed, it is in my most complete self. And I think stories about families is so important because it's a placing, it's a belonging, it's an identity.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think created a bit of division, I recognized as divisive after a while of growing up, was to have family that wanted to identify as British, wanted to be, valued the, colonialism and that kind of education more. And it's like, to maintain it, you have to exclude people. You have to say, like, this child is too dark. This is not really our family. He doesn't belong to us, or, yeah. And whereas I think, as you said, like going to Frankfield was a different experience because, there was no question about whether, I belonged there, because it wasn't, me belonging there didn't have anything to do with this kind of illusion about, this kind of past that you want to create, or like this specific lore that they wanted to kind of rest on that I wouldn't. Part of the lore, I think, on for me growing up, was that my grandfather was like kind of white. And I think it's like interesting, like having that conversation in a Jamaican context, whereas in America, where's the one drop rule, and being raised with the one drop rule, and, having my family say like, oh, he's white. And I was like, I don't, I don't think so. But, and having these two like ideologies like clash. And I think watching people, who are more racially ambiguous in my family, wanting to blend into a different kind of group, and in order to blend in, have to like cut off, the rest, or me, because, because I'm darker, and I would give them away. So, I think it's, I forgot what my point is, but it's complicated. I think, and I think also, because you were talking about going abroad too. And I remember the first time I went to England, when I was studying abroad, I think I had been like kind of indoctrinated with this idea that, we belong there. That's where we, that's where we come from. We're British. And so I had this picture of being like welcomed and, fitting in and feeling like more at home. But then I experienced like the most flagrant racism I've ever experienced in my entire life. It was like a shock to me, because I've been taught like, oh, your great grandfather was Scottish, or whatever they usually said, and that was like that was a big turning point to kind of realize that they wanted that this is just lore, like that it's not anything based on reality,
Yeah.
And that expectation of when you travel, you must come back better.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want your father think you bring back something new. You used to call him pan, now call him poo.
No little twang, you see.
Yes. Same way, not even so. Your features must change too, and that probably was probably also alluding to color. You come back as a black as you did leave here, and if you went to say, suppose we pass the place and introduce you as Mila, then would that think me because the mucker you come from because you talk too bad. So that thing is foreign must transform you, and as I said, families that do that, we are British. We're British, and we speak the Queen's English better than the Queen. So you must come back better, and the colonial must transform you. And as you said, you must hold on to that, because like Miss Margaret with the tall ear dug in her back in her old story time, that is advancement. Not Pearl who black, and Margaret with the tall ear down in her back. And
it's
so
interesting.
And those things are still.
But I don't want to spoil it for you. I don't want to spoil it for you, but look out for a character in this book.
Okay.
That is not Jamaican. He is white. and he's from Scotland, but then will also feel like he needs to change his accent
Mhm.
to take on the
Yes.
British.
because there's something about. And I remember when I had said to someone in Jamaica that I was going to NYU, it was like a scoff, like
Not
like
Cambridge.
New York, not
Not
going to
Cambridge.
going back to the
Rich?
UK. You're not like really. It's this. There's a so
We
and it's
hear
probably
you.
generational. It's probably generational. There are a lot of our former English teachers. I think if you're kind of born 70s, 80s, you're in a generation where a lot of your teachers were possibly trained by people who were trained in England
England.
Or
or
from
Mhm.
or,
England. Or
right
from England. Yeah.
from England, right, or
Mhm.
revered the British way of doing things as
Mm.
the right and proper way.
Mhm.
And so when this shift happened now, where a lot of our people started to go to the US more because it's
Mhm.
closer, it made more sense.
Yeah,
You know,
downgrade, downgrade.
Downgrade it
it's
was.
even
And I
like a
go from
downgrade.
England. England is the only place where education really key.
Yeah.
And another Jamaican said to me once, it's like, Carl, what you doing in New York? You don't know.
Mm.
I think you need to go to Austria. You need a level of sophistication. You need. I was like,
We're
wow, all right.
terrible.
So,
Yeah,
You know,
we're
so Maisy,
terrible.
I did like Austria back then.
with, with the
It's still in
first
the
book
Uncle Sam
behind
land.
you, Maisy, are you working on anything new? Are you onto the second book?
Yeah, I've been working on it. It's not going as quickly as I would like to go, but yeah, it's a book that mostly is set in America, but it still has Jamaican characters. It's set in Florida, and
Kingston
it's
21, Macy. Kingston 21. Have you ever heard them referred to Florida as Kingston
oh no,
21?
I haven't.
It's referred to as Kingston 21. So
Yeah.
our postal stops at 20 in
Oh,
Kingston.
okay.
So therefore, Florida is
it's
Kingston
Kingston.
21.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the book is like, it's been going in like different directions than I wanted to, but it was kind of inspired by my grandfather, the one from Frankfield. Like when he was younger, he used to be a cane cutter. He used to go to Florida to cut cane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a little part of it is kind of looking at those kind of guest workers in Florida in the 70s, 60s, 70s.
Okay. And do you have any now that it's alive and in the world? What do you have any big dreams and aspirations for those Ghosts Are Family? Movie, TV series, play.
I do. I think I really want. I do want it to. I think I have a TV agent, but I think the feedback we've gotten is that it's a little. The story is too complex. But I think I would like to see it as a limited
Limited
series.
series. Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be do very well as a limited series.
Yeah.
I think that would do it more justice actually.
Yeah. Have you seen Small Axe by Steve
Yes.
McQueen? Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
Small
Yes.
Yeah. That's
Love Small Axe.
yeah. If I could have like a dream director.
Yes.
he would be
Yes.
the director.
Because he cares. He
Small
cares.
Axe
He's coming to it with
beautiful
something.
thing. Was a beautiful thing, and each of them, I love the fact each of them, they work beautifully as a whole, but individually the projects were
They work.
and
They
just
work.
and as you said, Carl, care. Like some of them undid me. Like the one with the education with the little boy undid me,
Yeah, man.
completely
He's,
undid me, and even
that's
John
a good
Boyega
one.
as a policeman, and McQueen he has a quiet style. It's not a big brassy style. It's a quiet kind of. And then that homage to the Jamaican, the house party.
And people were just like, wait, are we watching something? There's a song that's playing forever.
Yeah.
And we're
Yes.
like, we're still in this. The song is still playing. It's just, and the people say, I was like, yes, this is it. This is it right here.
Yeah.
I know we're over an hour. I just want to ask everybody can get like a last question in. For me, I want to know who is your favorite character to write, if you had one, or who did you enjoy? Like, when you're writing, putting words into this person's mouth, something, what was your visceral reaction to one of them, or you're like, oh my god, I don't like this person?
Oh, I think the chapters that I like the most. I don't know. There's a story with the son Vincent when he first
Mhm.
comes to America, but he's having memories about an exorcism that he witnessed when he was back in Jamaica, and I think
Yes.
I like writing all the women's voices in that story. And you gave voice to every single. There's probably like 10 women.
Oh my god.
For every woman.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also like the last story. I feel like that one's a bit controversial because people don't understand it, but yeah, I thought I do enjoy the kind of horror element to the novel a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did like that too.
All right. Thoughts, Shawna-Kae. Last thoughts, Fabian.
So, I mean, one of my last my thoughts were, did you feel a difference in writing the women's voices as opposed to some of the male voices? Characterization, shading, and all of that in terms of for you, was it just as important, or did it feel different? Is what I'm saying. Giving voice to the women in the family versus the men.
Yeah, I actually felt like the women. The writing was more fluid. It felt easier to me. Maybe just because you spend a lot of time I spent a lot of time when I was young just listening to my mother and my aunts have conversations, and also going to church and listening to those conversations too. Whereas I feel like the men in my family are a little more soft spoken and don't really say anything. So I really had to struggle with whether it was sounding authentic or not. But I think I pulled it off, but it was a struggle. Yeah, it was harder doing the men's voices. It was hard too doing the villain. There's a chapter with this a slave owner or plantation owner. Doing the voice of somebody who's supposed to be evil, but making it seem like a real voice was kind of difficult.
Got you. Thank you.
I just want us to commit to a Rockaz Club link up at Calabash.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Like an interview.
We have to. I need to get my ticket.
Yeah, man, breakfast, lunch, and but also yeah, man, definitely. Because Maisy, you are our very first guest author.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited.
Yes,
for having me.
Thank you. And congratulations on this new book, This Baby in the World. Thank you for gracing us with it.
Thank you.
And thank you for being our first author. And we're looking forward to your continued success, more and more. And that limited series.
Yeah.
Yes, we're ready.
Yeah.
And we can be in all of us, Maisy can be in it. All of us here.
Yes. And I can double as accent coach.
Oh yeah, no, that's
not Jamaican.
That's my worst fear. That was my fear with the audiobook. And so I was so happy when they got Karl that they would just get somebody who
yes.
do the accents.
It was a delight. Maisy Card for Rockaz Book Club, our first.
Thank you.
First book. These ghosts are family. We'll see everybody again. All right. Walk good.
Take care.
Walk good.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye.